Since it is 7:04 p.m. and we have everybody present, I would motion to open the planning board meeting for Tuesday, May 6th. Amy Weiss is an aye.
Second, Steph's an aye.
Second, thank you, Steph. Jim?
Aye.
Frank?
Aye.
And so we're missing Bob. So the agenda for this evening, items not anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance. We have minutes from April 15th. We have a scenic road hearing at 7:15 p.m. regarding the driveway curb cut for 65 Farm Road because of its we're not judging the curb cut, we are judging the scenic road stone wall opening. We have current planning board business, recap of annual town meeting, future topics for the planning board, and item 3 on the agenda is board reorganization, followed by other business to discuss next meeting dates, reports on meetings with other boards and entities, and the town planner report. Are there any other items to be added to the agenda? Hearing none, a motion to accept the agenda as posted.
So
Moved by Frank and second by Steph. Thank you. All in favor? Because we are in person, we can just do a voice vote. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Any opposed? No. I think everybody said aye. All right, so we should start with the minutes or
Minutes.
and
So I didn't copy off the minutes. I'd sent them all out. Does anyone need me to go run and make a copy or?
see.
Go ahead and just open them. Does anyone have?
It was with the.
I understand if you're connected. I can share.
Yep, I can share that. Even down on the screen. Myself. Sorry to figure out one.
So, anyone have any amendments to the minutes from April 15th?
I have just a couple of minor things.
Okay.
Says Harrison I twice in the vote. I think it was a 4-0 vote.
Okay.
Just to open the meeting, it's really minimal. The only other comment I had was on the PowerPoint slides. It was only the planning budget PowerPoint that would be reserved unless it pulled was called, right? So I just sort of clarified that we went through all the PowerPoints and then just the one would be held, would be at that pocket if a held was called at town meeting. I think that was it. Just a clarification.
I had no amendment. Does anyone else have anything, comments or questions on the minutes from April 15th?
Just a second. I guess I'm okay because I really wasn't there for a few moments.
If you approve the minutes.
Yeah.
All right, so motion to accept the minutes as amended. Second, moved and seconded. Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Any you abstaining from?
I'm staying for a little bit.
So, Deb, everyone's approved the minutes as amended with Frank abstaining. It's 7:09.
Do you want to go down to the other business?
Sure.
Look at the next meeting days or something.
Yeah. All right, so the next one we're gonna have is 5/20. That we said we were gonna have it in Zoom. And then we would be looking at June. I don't know what people want to do for summertime, because I know sometimes you've only met once a month in the summer, so.
Unless we had to have.
Right. So do you want to just schedule right now, May 20th, and then the first one in June, and then see from there? So June 3rd. And then discuss from there further. That makes sense to people.
Sounds very similar.
Okay.
I think the ones that we had we had a full meeting in June, but then the July and the August is where we're, but I think if we do that, that's fine. We always add one.
Yeah, I figured we can add the June one and then take a look. We have some plans in front of us, we might have to say, yes, it's July and August. So for now, we're just gonna do the May 20th, June 3rd, hybrid or Zoom, what are people's preference?
I'm fine with coming in. Yeah, I'm fine with either. I think it's kind of nice to be in person, to be honest, but
Just a reminder that I can't do May 20th. If I could potentially come like very late, like at 7:45 or 8, and it would be easier to do that. See the location of this.
And I can be wishful and think we're done.
I mean, I mean, I won't be on the board, but, I know in the past when we've done hybrid, I mean, it's nice to have. If we're doing it in person, it's nice to have most of the board in person, but that doesn't mean that you can't. If it means that you could participate remotely rather than not at all, then that seems to be a nice benefit.
So why don't I put down hybrid right now for June 3rd, which would be a nice introduction for the next elected person. Too.
yeah. It's a good point.
Yeah, I mean, she'll be elected for the May 20th meeting if she's sworn in by then.
But does she have the same conflict?
So you get to middle school.
Yeah,
Okay.
no, I think our overlap is 3rd grade, this is a 5th grade thing, so I think maybe we're okay.
All right, well, we'll plan June 3rd hybrid, and I can definitely do a formal introduction before.
Or do we visit on June like 23 needed to?
Yes.
The situational awareness is greatly improved with the owl.
Well, it's a little better. Deb has a tough visual. Yeah, but
I know,
um,
I don't know what that's about. Let me see what I can,
how does it sound for you? Can you hear us okay, Deb?
perfectly, perfectly.
Okay, you did it. Maybe. Well, not as smoothly as I wanted. I still couldn't repeat Jeremy's way where I didn't have to use this computer because this one was like a slave after that, but that's okay. Other reports on meetings with other boards and entities. Does anyone have anything to report? Rob on trails, sustainability, Frank?
Nothing, no. We're hiring a sustainability coordinator. We hope to hear back the results of the offer on Friday, so hopefully it'll be positive.
That'd be awesome. Great. Rob, anything with trails?
Well, I've been working with some of the Forest and Trails folks talking about the Dopping Brook crossing is something that might be approved, and I do want to speak to the conservation agent Joyce about it, though. It's not clear whether it has anything to do with Sherborn at this point, because everybody thought the town line was in the middle of the stream. But it could be that the stream is actually well on the Holliston side of the line. So that's like the first thing that would have to be determined in a survey before we even move on from there.
Yeah. Okay, any other reports, groundwater stuff, historical commission, Jim?
Other than the fact that we're looking for members on both, we're losing a few as well, so.
Okay,
Groundwater Protection Committee has been sort of on and off discussing the idea of drought regulations. Some of our neighbors have those. So it would be a bylaw, I think, that would prohibit outdoor, non-essential outdoor water use during times of drought as determined by, I can't remember, maybe the select board. It's in very infancy stages, but I just thought I'd mention it because I haven't given a groundwater update in a little while.
okay,
Dover does it, and Natick may recently have started regulating outdoor water use, but
and Dover has wells as well, so.
yeah,
Yeah,
it would be kind of modeled, I think, after Dover.
yeah,
Rose doesn't, they have town.
Yeah, a lot of town wells can do it because they have more authority. But here it's a little harder. And just,
And then I did meet with friends of the COA that were looking to. The 350th had wanted to do a pavilion in the caustic grounds for town campus. That did not pan out. But the Friends of the COA are very interested in this concept, and we're trying to look to get a group together. It fits in with the master plan. It's actually specifically mentioned for town campus, where it says exploring and adding the features into the town campus, and it says possibly a pavilion or gazebo. So this is would be right in line, and it would be great to get the planning board involved on that once we get to more of a conceptual stage. And on the historical commission had looked at it. So we are trying to get a collective group together to feel that might be the turn to do something. Try to wait after the 350th, after the historical center.
Yeah, they have some nice ideas.
So that'll be this summer. There'll be a group to work. I think we are now.
It is now 7:16 and we have the application for scenic road. Hearing, we had, I don't have my language in front of me, apologies. But this was posted as a hearing, as a new hearing, correct, even though.
Right, so it is a new hearing. It's on the. It's moving the prior hearing we had. We had a hearing in December for the opening of the stone wall. And the developer now wants to relocate that opening, so we're doing a new hearing to replace the other opening that we had okayed. The pictures we had sent out, there are no trees involved in the area. Everything else is going to be similar detail with the size of the stones to be removed. I would assume the conditions will also be the same, that you may want to put on. That decision last time of what we did, yeah, I think Eddie May has it. The prior opening was to the left of the gravel driveway or west, and this one is going to be east or to the right of the existing gravel driveway. What's in there is the existing Middlesex County plan on file, which shows 2 lots, 1 big lot and 1 small lot. That's the only thing that is on record right now. So it's before the board to discuss and review the soil.
and I'm sharing the plan, which shows in pink the existing gravel, and then in blue the proposed. I don't want to say driveway because we're not approving a driveway, but where that blue meets the street would be the location of the cut in the stone wall.
Right. So it was advertised on April 21st and April 28th in the Metro West Daily News. The letters had been mailed and notification by select board tree warden, although we don't have a tree warden. I need to find out who what if I do, I don't know if do we have a tree warden?
Well, Sean is the tree warden, and if there's an instance that needs to be addressed, then he has the authority to appoint someone or bring someone on when but given that there's no trees here.
Right, but so notifying Sean covers it. Okay. Conservation Commission and Historical Commission. So I guess, are there any questions?
Is the applicant present?
No, he was not, but he made it tonight, and there did not seem to be any change in what he had proposed prior.
He did let us know he wasn't going to be able to attend, and he asked Heidi if there were any concerns with what was being presented. And given that we're just, what is it, 20 feet, and the situation with the circumstances are same. As a board, I would think that we would, there was discussed, I think, same terms, and this would replace the previously granted opening in the stone wall. So we wouldn't have 2 openings approved. We would have this in place of the previously approved stone wall opening.
Yeah, you last approved a 21-foot opening with stones to be utilized for crack on the side of the stone wall.
Doesn't look like this stone wall in the new location is in any better or worse condition than the other location.
No,
It's the same, all along that stretch of the road, you've probably driven it, but all along that stretch of the road, the stones are kind of fallen into the swale that's there. So I think in some ways, either way, having the ability, the conditions that we placed on the previous approval, where we asked for those stones that are being removed to be utilized to build up the line of wall of stone, and it's an improvement potentially.
And so on.
Okay, is there a second? It's moved to approve the new location of the wall, do we opening, the condition that this replaces the other, that'll be
same
written.
conditions as the prior
Separate.
decision.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Alright.
Right, unanimous support right here.
We'll close the hearing.
What's that?
We close the hearing.
Yes, we should close, so a motion to close the hearing regarding 55 Farm Road, Scenic Road Act. Stonewall. Is there a second?
Second.
Moved, seconded, all in favor? Aye. Unanimous support.
7:21.
Okay, so
Half of the town.
town meeting. So, bravo to the board. We did it.
And to our presenters, excellent job.
Thanks for everyone for being through all the support. I think, it's frustrating sometimes how many meetings we held and the meetings that we held with advisory, and then you get to town meeting and you're all braced for a bunch of people to get up. I mean, it's a good thing. I guess it means that we did the homework ahead of time. So,
The time helped us.
and the time helped us. I think everyone was thoroughly exhausted by the time it got to the zoning board. But Heidi, you and Chris Canny being so available and championing everything was huge. So
Well, Chris was a big help in
yeah,
getting the things that he's been trying to get done for years. So,
right.
and I'm thrilled that we also will be getting funds to start looking at our bylaws and updating our merges. So that,
Yeah, I'm surprised there was no hold or even a question on that. That was shocking.
I'm thrilled. I think that's the right directions.
Yeah.
I feel like the effort that Heidi and Chris put in was just really essential. Like, I don't think that this would have gone the way it did without that. And then the roadshow that the two of you guys did to go sort of make sure that individuals understood what was going on was really key. And I looked that evening, I was sort of like, were we over prepared? And then I was thinking, it was worth all of that time and effort so that people understand what they're approving, and far better to be over prepared than to not do enough and have the questions come out of left field that you're not prepared to answer. So just thank you guys for your efforts.
And I had the same question. Was it like, could I have done less? But I looked at the meetings that I had where there were some very key people that spent a lot of time. And I think that was worthwhile.
So I would say,
Johnson has. Okay.
Go ahead, Eric.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt. I would never predicted it went through that easily. I mean, I've lived in town forever and I've seen so many zoning changes, and some of there's a pretty strong anti-development group, and even something smells like that, they'll come out in forces and try to. But was it the biggest win of the night? It might have been. It might have been like maybe the Red Sox question to test it, and maybe a couple others. But I mean, as far as like the percentage, I would never have seen that coming, and it's absolutely due, I think, to the work of this board and Heidi as well. I mean, and it was late at night as well. But those are the people who stick around, the people who kind of don't want that. You know what I mean? You're not going to get the people who are going to passively hit yes to stick around at night. It's going to be kind of the people against these things. And I think it's only due to the hard work of this board and to Heidi. So just congratulations on that 3A vote. And I've been kind of transparent where I was initially a little bit against it, but you convinced me. And just good job for that. Really good job.
Thank
So
you.
the 3A passed 131 to 8, which is a 94% yes vote for that. That was pretty major. The zoning bylaw that for Chris Kenny, that was a 91%. So that was still really good, but the other one was 94 for the 3A. So that was really something.
I mean, a lot of you have been in town for a while and then sat through a lot of town meetings and I think it's you know, kind of going through this process, you've learned that you go through all the advisory meetings and it's a different crowd than what's at town meeting. So, you know, advisory's got a duty to be very detailed and scrutinize everything. And then the Bloody Saturday meeting is always, you know, got to really detail, hone in. And so I guess if we've done it correct, which it sometimes feels like overkill, the idea is that you get to town meeting and somehow it is conveyed that this has been thoroughly vetted and there are no gotcha. So those who are not really maybe clued in, at least hopefully have enough faith in their neighbors that nothing's being pulled over on them. So I guess that's why you do the detailed work and the repetitiveness.
The biggest hurdle was advisory.
Yeah.
Meeting with them ahead of time was key. I mean, that was hours we spent in with small groups, and it really was worthwhile because there was a lot of education that was done, and that made the biggest difference, I think. And then getting their support then after.
So that gave the support on Saturday, which then also really helped it on that annual town meeting floor as well.
Yeah.
Because you saw some of the other ones where there was the you know, the minority votes and those and some of the statements that were made.
Right.
You know, and we had full unanimous support and even some kudos from one or two of them that saw the process that we've gone through. So that was really
Yeah, I would say I would start that earlier next time, meeting ahead of them, because I think trying to cram all that in 1 week, it was a very long week for me. That's there's just lessons learned.
Yeah, there's a lot of lessons learned, and I guess the other lesson to carry forward is now we do have the funding to have some assistance with bylaw review. These articles that we brought forward were articles that our building inspector, zoning enforcement officer brought and said these are things that just are not practical that he's been dealing with for years, and could we please clean them up? And so it was a huge, I think that made a big difference too, is it appealed to a lot of people's common sense. In some ways, the next stage of having a consultant review bylaws, it depends on who the consultant is, how things are presented, and that caution of not just getting into the legal work and the you know, the just making things conform, but also making sure that there are practical updates and that there's someone, you know, hopefully Chris will continue to assist with explaining why they make sense or why stuff, or if there's a recommendation made that doesn't make sense, having that sounding board available.
Eric, still have a comment?
Yes, go ahead, Eric.
Just one last thing on the 3A. It's kudos to the actual sites selected. Like I said, I had some pushback initially, but there's some thought that the AG may actually scrutinize some of these towns that are putting like already developed parcels in when they have available other undeveloped parcels. I mean, a fully developed town is different, but to have us to put in whatever it is, 6 acres right along a water line at the closest possible point to the actual commuter rail will stand up to any scrutiny that ever happens. So if the AG or other groups start to scrutinize this location, we're very, very well situated there. It'll stand up to any scrutiny, I believe.
Probably more concerned with the other towns, they're not comply.
I think Daryl has her hand up. I can't, I can see it on mine.
So, is there someone else attending that?
Daryl Beersley has her.
Okay. Daryl, if you're, I can't see you on the big screen, so, but if you're present, you're welcome to say something.
Okay, the presentation was great. It made it
very easy to follow what was going on and what the rationale was and everything else. So very easy to support it. I do have I'd like to ask for a tip. How were you able to, in meeting with advisory, like draw out any questions that they may have had before town meeting? Like,
Well, I
was
met
that
in,
an effort or was the information flowing freely back and forth? I'd just like to understand that for.
yeah, it did go back and forth. I started out with the groups of 1, 2, or 3 of them. And it was, I varied between an hour and a half and 2.5 hours. I ran through all the zoning changes, basically going through not quite line by line, but topic by topic with them.
Mhm.
And several of them really scrutinized and had a lot of questions. So as we went along, the questions flowed back and forth. And they came out with a few pointers and we discussed why we could do something, why we couldn't do something. You know, and they had some pointers that we said we can work on it for the next time around. And we understood that, you know, we had our hearings already, so there's only certain things we were going to bring forward. But it was a good dialogue, and I think that
Okay.
gave a lot of trust on either side.
That was also Heidi
Chris.
and Chris
Mm.
scheduling those meetings with them, setting those up in advance so that they could
Yeah.
come to that meeting prepared with their questions and then hear and see the presentation and continue asking more questions and so on, which
Yeah.
really helped so that it's on that, and that happened before Bloody Saturday,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
so that even
Before we presented to advisory in a small group, in our normal presentation before them. And I did some Zoom and I did some in person. I gave them the choice that we would do either one.
And was that with the liaisons specifically in the beginning or
I went,
anybody?
no, I went to all 9 of them. I emailed all 9 and said, I'd,
Oh,
be willing
okay.
to talk with them, and they all took me up on it.
Okay.
The
I
slides.
mean, I could see that was a major change in sort of operations. So the outreach would be different. Otherwise, I don't find that people have the bandwidth, which is why they're assigning liaisons with different groups. But okay, something to consider is to maybe, all right, to push. Because we did
I mean,
have meetings, certainly meetings prior to town meeting. I was just curious since a lot of things were big surprises as questions for us, of course. So just curious. Thanks.
right, I mean, what was helpful, I mean, zoning is similar, any bylaw, it was helpful that the handout that Heidi and Chris sat down together and created. Went topic by topic and put a narrative next to the actual language explaining kind of in, regular speak. What the intent or the goal was of making the change that was being proposed. So it gave kind of that what was going on in Chris's head and what was going on in Heidi's, what was the practical reason. And sometimes it was just because it made, meeting matching building codes. Sometimes it was fixing an unintended consequence of existing language or, things that just weren't working. But explaining that and giving everyone a chance to process it, and then they knew what questions they had. And then when they met with Heidi and Chris or the group, they had their questions kind of ready to go.
And actually, the chair of the Dover Planning Board contacted me and she liked what we had put online.
Actually, I have a question about the text of the warrants articles. They're extremely detailed, and there's been some discussion about, by analogy, with other towns have a much more compact text and refer to documents on file. And I'm curious, when we're talking about transparency and preparing the way, the relative merits of having all of the detail in the warrant as part of that transparency versus having a sort of more compact and easier to digest warrant text. And I'm interested in what people's reflections are on the merits, dismerits of that level of detail.
I mean, preparing the warrant would be a whole lot easier if we adopted the Dover method, which is very concise and references people back to whatever materials are online, and it would also make it easier as we were making adjustments and changes and not have Jeannie ready to kill us every time we had to update something. But there is something to be said for those who do take time to read it, to actually see the language, for, like you say, for transparency, you feel like less likely you're missing something. You don't have to go online and dig it up. So I don't know what the right answer is. I mean, financially, it would be less papers and less printing, and it would be less hours of needing to constantly edit. So there is a benefit to keeping it concise. It just depends on, yeah, I don't know. I guess it's, case by case, but
I mean, I worry a little bit with the consultant-led, more comprehensive update, that if there are, little word changes on most of the pages, that could get really cumbersome. So we might have to think about.
yeah.
And if stuff is truly online, if there's a kind of like a red line version, if you with all the kind of the minutia of the changes,
Now that we
that's
have
not bad
the
in theory.
code online, things are improved.
Yeah.
I think prior to having the work that town clerk and Jackie did to get the full everything in one town code, and have that standardized makes a difference. I think we can more safely reference people to it is available. Prior to that, there were segments of each department on different pages, so now it's in one place. I think we're in a different place and we could reevaluate it.
No, and I did color code yellow on it, so when they did go online, it was very visible as to what the changes were.
I mean, generally, I'm more likely to read something online, frankly, and so maybe there's
Yeah.
a point in time where it becomes
I would think you might want to make a distinction where anything that is, you would consider supporting material or background material, you don't necessarily have to have in the warrant unless it's pretty terse. But if it's something that's actually going to be the text of a bylaw, I don't know, it seems like it's a good idea to have it in the printed warrant.
The other towns don't put it in.
I think if it's new,
That's what-
that makes sense.
Yeah, but it's,
But if it's
Yeah, I
reams
suppose
of
if it's,
adjustments, that's the
yeah.
if it's minor changes that isn't actually changing the real meaning and intent of it, it's.
I think that's a good topic to put on for next year.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't know, I mean. We've got on the agenda for this evening, other than I think we've kind of exhausted recap for the moment. And then there's the discussion of future topics, which we've kind of hit on. And I'm kind of feeling like we should maybe jump ahead to item 3 on the agenda.
I wanted to ask one thing about
Oh,
future
sure.
topics, which is the just to kind of go over what's the organization in place and how do we see it moving forward, all this grant about all the re-engineering of the town center that's possibly going on.
What's the organization for the that we got the funding from MPO for the design review? The organization is we haven't signed a contract yet. We're still in that process of getting the scope finalized for that project. And then once it's for design, and first it's going to be, the whole project will be multiple years. But the first part is there's that 25% phase is the first goal. And to get there, there will be community engagement. I know that, what's the project? Sorry.
It's a transportation project.
Transportation project.
So there is gonna be a role to talk with planning board for downtown planning to, like the master plan, how that's gonna be incorporated into that as well. I think right now it's envisioned there is a core group, mainly Jeremy, Sean, Addie May is working with DPW. Myself, I think Eric and Marion were involved on that. So that's been the group looking at choosing a consultant, working with a consultant, focusing on the transportation and the intersection aspects of it. if the vision is that there's gonna be an expansion that will then include input from different groups.
Yeah, I would imagine we would want at least a liaison from the planning board in whatever the working group is. I'm guessing there might be other boards who also want.
Yeah, and I don't know how much, I don't think at this point, Sean might know more, but I don't think it's been decided on what's gonna be a working group yet.
Well, yeah, I mean, the steering committee is not gonna have a liaison from every committee, we'll have 15 people, so, I mean, the initial committee is, as Heidi said, and that's mostly for the contract negotiation and get a kickstarted. A lot of the deliverables don't really involve a lot of public involvement, like the survey.
Survey
It's
means
good,
that
you know,
not public.
The public do through planning board and through some public meetings, which need to be well advertised. To discuss, you know, different alternatives, etc. When it comes to bike lanes and other things. And how to design some of the intersections we're looking for. Keeping in mind, this is loosely phrased as it's an intersection improvement project. It's not considered a corridor project, it's an intersection improvement. We happen to have 6 intersections that are inside the scope, starting from, you know, either in the Solomon and ending at Lake and Coolidge. So to us, it's a corridor, but it is studying all those intersections. And hopefully, we can incorporate them all in the scope. That's yet to be seen.
So we're before the designer selection process right now, or?
We're just beyond, somewhat beyond the designer selection. Hopefully, we can get the contract in there.
So, I mean, as the process goes, Heidi would be at those meetings and would continue to update the planning board. Would be then, soon as there's any place where there's input, at the moment it's, you know, contract, and as Sean said, the survey is not a public survey, it's a survey of the land, so it's not an engagement part yet.
Yeah, right now, specify that.
I just wanted to make sure that when you said survey, that no one interpreted it as a public survey, it's a survey, just what's the land,
The conditions.
yeah. So. Again, they're looking at the contracts right now, so. But, yeah, I mean, we had. The 8th grade has a new civics teacher. That has, at Dover Sherborn, that has a new curricula. That is pushing the kids to get involved with local projects. And I know Heidi was inundated, Sean and myself were inundated with all of a sudden this flurry of 8th graders wanting to reach out and talk with us, and you know, that all these great ideas about sidewalks and roadways and how can they, and it, you know, I also know some of them, one of them was the sister of, you know, I knew like 6 years ago talking about sidewalks, and these are all, you know, really wonderful. They're things that, I know, you know, we all have talked about as a board a long time. And we also know the realities of what it takes to get how these projects inch along. So it was, we talked with some of the kids about like, yeah, there's this project, and then you kind of realize that by the time it possibly comes into play, they're gonna have graduated and left. So it's hard to somehow get them to be enthused about things. They want instant, you know, reaction, and that's hard to.
And then when I asked him, I said, well, tell me what sidewalks you think are problems, you know, like, what do you see in town, you know, we're willing to listen to you. Oh, they all lived in Dover.
Yeah.
2 cars lived on Pine Street.
Oh.
Yeah. Which is definitely a nightmare to walk on,
Yeah, and I was like, okay.
but it's, I mean, it's great, and it was nice to have that group. I think our feedback back to the school was we would have liked some heads up so that we could have maybe been more responsive, and maybe we could have offered to go to the school, make it easier for, because all of a sudden we got all these Dover kids that they seem to be first to reach out, and we got the Zoom scheduled with them, and of course they're kids at school, so they're trying to set these Zooms up in the hallway, and so it would have, you know, hopefully now that we're aware of this. Hopefully, as a community, we can maybe be, it's nice to have a little bit more engagement with the school.
So there's a good model, the BSA or the Boston Society of Architects sponsors this program every year. It just had it. Actually, it's called Kids Build.
Okay,
And I think if you go on their website, you might find more information, but it's involving kids in Boston with architects or industry professionals that play roles like the building inspector or
oh, that's really cool.
you know,
Yeah,
or the contractor, or hurdles that they might encounter and how to deal with that. And then there's different.
so it'd be on the BSA website, Boston Society of Architects website.
It's architects.org,
Okay,
Kids build.
Kids Build, yeah.
Kids Build, okay, yeah. Great. So I guess going back to item 3 on the agenda, and this came up at the April 15th meeting, briefly at the end, and I know Frank, you were there for part of it. And I felt that it would be nice to be able to do a board reorganization with our current board, who's been involved rather than someone who just gets elected and doesn't know anything about what's been happening as a board for the last year plus. Um, and I think there's a couple different models. I know as a planning board, there's historical that kind of tend to have a chair, and that person every June it kind of comes up, but I do know the select board has a model where they rotate more frequently, and I think that's a nice model to um, consider. Um, I think our board is strong because of us being 5 members and associate who all contribute and not just one person. The chair, I feel, is a predominantly just a point person for communications to help disperse communications and help run the meeting. I know that I had voiced that I felt that the chair needed to be able to, it just happens by default that the chair tends to get sent communications. So in the past, we've been hindered as a board as a whole if those communications are not distributed in a timely manner. So I think it's important. I know that I had voiced that the struggle is, I feel Steph is extremely organized and has um lengthwise been part of the board for the longest since all her work with the minutes. I also know Frank has been the longest serving elected member, and I know that Frank has certainly managed running a meeting. I don't know how other members of the board feel, or if there's anyone else who was interested at this stage. I do feel that being able to take communications and distribute is really kind of it kind of it tends to be everyone looks up and people that have concerns go, who's the chair? And even though we have a town planner who is which should be the person that those questions first go to, and town planner can share with the board, it just sometimes happens by default. So there are some also the Conservation Commission has a co-chair, which I don't know if that's a model as a board that is something to consider. It allows a little bit more of kind of kind of support for each other as a board too, and it also then allows for those names to be on there as the communication point too for people to reach out to assist with communication. I don't know how others on the board feel, but Steph, since I put you on the spot last time, I know I'm kind of, if you have any thoughts on.
Yeah, I did. After the discussion a couple of weeks ago, I actually called Heidi and said, is there a model of co-chairs that would work? Because it seems like a lot for one person, and Um. And Heidi said there was a model of co-chairs that could be workable. I'm, I do feel like, my role is likely to continue in the realm of the bylaws. Just general, it seems like kind of a natural, fit for me to do some of that, leadership. And I know we have a big one coming up. Um, So, and I know that there's a lot of communications with respect to bylaw changes. But that said, like, I don't, the, you know, your suggestion from last time of like becoming the chair is like potentially, I don't want to say the wrong words here, but like, it feels like a lot on top of doing bylaw work, and I think there are other really good candidates who can do a lot of the chair's responsibilities, like running meetings and, drafting some of the letters and, taking more of a, other than the bylaws, taking a pretty strong leadership position. So I'm open to that. I'm open to a different model where somehow bylaw communications can not have to go through someone else to get routed to me, but if there's another model that works that for communications, like that's fine too. It just seems a little cumbersome to ask the other boards to say, well, this person is the chair, but if you have a question about bylaws, you should send it to this person instead. That's why I was sort of like, that's what's been kind of going through my head. So it just seems cumbersome to try to set up a separate communication channel for bylaws. But I'm open to discussions.
I mean, a co-chair would allow then other boards to distribute their communications and not worry about which two members can they distribute to without running into open meeting law violation, because you can have two on a communication outside of a meeting. Uh, so that would be the reason to designate, to make it clear, to allow for that communication to be facilitated, that are those kind of just details that you're trying to, I mean, we all saw most of the last couple of months where Chris sharing with Heidi and Steph and I, it didn't initially happen with Steph, but we kept saying like Steph is, and of course Chris saw it through the meetings, the kind of details for following through and maintaining the two, being able to do those edits, and helped us get through a lot of those, making sure that by the end of the meeting we had a version rather than waiting, or having to, making sure that things were exactly as we had discussed in a meeting. So, but I don't know what, the rest of you about, I don't know what and I didn't ask if anyone else had interest as well.
Well, I would say, I guess I already gave this opinion before, but I really kind of like the idea in principle of rotating the chairmanship, because otherwise, you end up with, well, this person already knows everything, so let's keep them in there, and there's one person for all time until they get so burned out they can't function anymore. And so I kind of like it in principle, but then it's like, who steps up each time? And so I think maybe actually, if the people who are interested at this point are interested in the co-chair model, I think that could make that work better, because you get, it's sort of, it's less of a step to say, I'm gonna take over this part of the responsibility. And so you can kind of like move one person in and one person out each year, and you have more continuity. But everybody would end up, sort of taking a turn at some point if they're, at least if they're staying on the board for a long term. So I kind of think those two concepts might actually work well together.
Yeah, I was thinking, thinking about the sort of a hybrid kind of works. You can't have, but where you have co-chairs with the expectation that one stays and one goes each year, you have the value of continuity combined with that turnover. So that could work. Obviously that doesn't, when you're starting it fresh, you don't have that stagger sort of inherently built in.
So there'd be co-chairs for the first year, and then would it resume to a single chair after that, or to be determined based on how things go during that
I
year?
would think to be determined, although if it works well, it may be continued, right?
See who steps up and,
And there's no reason it has to be like a year exactly. I mean, if you are as a board working on something and you are, if the bylaws take a year and a half or something, you might want to continue, but then after that, you might want to rotate off and take a breather, or it could be, it depends, but I do think, as Rob said, we tend to, as a board, have kind of gotten stuck for years with, I mean, the same chair for a long time unless that person all of a sudden leaves town. And so it's, I think, a nice model that you don't have to necessarily totally leave to get off the board, so to get out of being a chair. So it's kind of nice to, I don't know, just spread that out.
In terms of running the meeting, how would that work?
I think it need communication between the chair. I mean, right now what we have currently, I think Frank has run several meetings, and is comfortable with running the meetings. I think Steph is her, her, what's been extremely valued that none of us have is the ability to deal with the technical challenges that we have now that we have these Zoom meetings and hybrids, and the ability to share these documents and do this, especially if we are undertaking a year as a town with the bylaw updates. We saw how detailed that is.
Right, and analyzing those details and piecing them together and knowing where they land ultimately.
Right. Frank, what are your thoughts? Because I'm kind of speaking first, sorry.
so I'm liking how this direction is going. I, am in a position where I have more time and ability to step into a role like that. I'm interested in stepping into a role like that, and I would also say that beyond just the technical aspects of the work, steps, brain and ability, and just I hope it's joy. I don't know, but you certainly have a lot of ability to work on that bylaw stuff, and I think it's something that you have an affinity for, and would love to have you continue to do that. And if you wanted to do a co-chair, I would be very open to that. And I look at it as the planning board has really, it's like two roles. It's that permitting approval bylaw part, and then there's like the planning and the vision and what does this town going to look like, and ultimately those two roles come together. And then there's the running of the meeting and the setting up the communications. And the thing that's making me more available and being able to do much of this is that I'm going to be retiring in June. So I will have time that it doesn't just have to be Seth that does all the technical work and sending out all the information that, we can be pretty equal in that regard. And, if Steph wants to run a meeting or if she wants me to run a meeting, I'm flexible with that as well. But so if Steph, if you're interested in the board, I'm
Is there anyone else on the board who wants a leadership role like this in this capacity?
I kind of got some things going on that makes me not available enough to have the time commitment that I can acquire just at this time.
We'll still need a vice chair.
I mean, Tim,
Chairs. Being the freshman planning board member.
sure, you will.
You get clerk by default, so.
I think for me, the biggest positive is just again, with so much communications happening, making it very clear of who would be the two people that someone wanting to share something with the board could address to without running afoul of the meeting and making it, okay, there's two, and then that information is shared. You two are well aware, and you could respond to that person that, we're not deliberating, but we've heard and will share. But at least there's 2 points of contact, so nothing falls through the cracks.
Is there a motion?
So I would make a motion to, I don't know, do we need to have a motion to have co-chairs first? As a
Yeah.
planning board?
I would do that, I would do two.
Public question, it's on hand up.
There's, yeah,
I was gonna suggest one thing I consider, I'm Jeff Walker, for those of you who don't know me, is the select board calls it a chair and a vice chair. And the advantage of that is there's certain things that we sign that the chair has to sign. So I'm not sure if there's a planning board requirement to do that, but, and typically the vice chair then becomes the chair. So you
Didn't
could,
have, I looked up with Jackie and there was nothing required that we had to.
yeah, probably not, but we sign things, and two other things. One is I travel a lot, and I'm gonna be traveling a lot more, so having a co-chair, vice chair is good, so that,
Yeah.
with Zoom, we can participate remotely, but sometimes you can't. And the other thing is, we have several instances where either Eric or I've had to not sit in on a discussion, recuse ourselves, so you want to have someone that can run the meeting and is up to speed on a topic. If you know there's a certain topic that the current chair or vice chair has to, not participate because they have some kind of conflict.
Do you?
So like we do with Eric, for example, anything on, Coolidge, because he's the town engineer for Birmingham, and refuses himself.
Do you see an advantage to the chair, vice chair model over a co-chair model?
Necessarily, but it does give you the continuity. In other words, the chair generally runs the meeting every week. We don't alternate, but we alternate if one of the two of us is away, or if one of the two of us has to recuse ourselves. So you don't have to communicate as much that way, but if I know that I'm gonna be away, then I'll brief someone, or vice versa. If I know that I or Eric or someone has to recuse themselves, we can prepare, but.
And what if you, as a select board member, had, wanted to provide some critical feedback on the bylaws? Would you email the chair and the vice chair?
No, because that's a quorum. You can only communicate with one. Three people can't do anything, two people can.
No, I'm sorry, would you, if you wanted to communicate with the planning board?
Say that, you say again?
If you wanted to communicate with the planning board on a concern you had about a bylaw, would
Yeah.
you email both the chair and the vice chair of the planning board for that conversation?
I haven't given that much thought, but probably not, because I would assume I would just write to the chair, and then that person could then
Okay.
hand it off to, I wouldn't necessarily know, maybe it's the expertise of one member of the planning board, so I would probably write to the chair and to Heidi.
Mhm.
Just like Diane tells us what to do, so we don't have to think very much. But you let the administrator, sort of be the facilitator, and the chair made to be aware of it, but
Okay.
then they can delegate.
It works on Conservation Commission,
Yeah,
so how do they handle having co-chairs?
well, that came about because I kind of blew up the Conservation Commission about 5 years ago, 4 years ago, when Neil Kessler resigned, but
I think it takes the stress off of it being, or not stress, not even a word, but I know with the Friends of the Sherborn Library, they, a number of years ago, instituted co-chairs, and it then makes it that if you're communicating, you communicate with both. And it does assist with ensuring that communication is dropped. And I think as a board, for our board to be, or the planning board to be strong, the biggest benefit is to making sure that everyone's informed and that information is distributed timely, so.
I think Michael and Courtney have it worked out pretty well too, of like who's going to run a meeting or who's going to do it. I think it just they naturally have talked about it and came to an agreement of, you know, this is their strength, this is that strength, and. Yeah.
So I'd like to make a motion, I propose a motion for the planning board to adopt a co-chair model for the board leadership.
I'll second that.
Seconded, okay, so I've made a motion and Rob has seconded the motion for a co-chair. All in favor of a co-chair model for the planning board? Okay, unanimous support. And I make a motion for Steph Harrison and Frank Hoke to accept the roles of co-chairs for at least the next cycle of the Sherborn Planning Board.
Second.
Not second. All in favor? Okay. Congratulations, you two. I mean, I think you both have, we both know, we all know your strengths, and that's what the planning board needs. You both have different leadership styles and you have different strengths, and they're both valued. And I think the best benefit of this opportunity is allowing both of your strengths to support the board and for the board as a whole to function. So.
Yeah, and likewise, having the board support the chair to work together and communicate. Well, Heidi and
Select board is,
chair.
and working with the select board, making sure things get communicated.
Okay, so. Do we, I don't,
Do we need to
Motion to adjourn.
do we need, are there other,
You know, we can reorganize when Brett Piercy's on for vice chair and clerk, unless you want to vote vice chair and clerk right now.
I mean, with you, current vice chair was you, Frank, right? So the vice chair role with Jim or Rob, and there's the clerk, which is an odd. I mean, the vice chair role is probably the most. There's an assumption that vice chair would eventually be someone interested in stepping up for chair at some point. So, but otherwise, it's not a very well defined role.
It is a role that the chair not be available.
Right.
But within the co-chair model, that probably would be pretty much. But
That, yeah.
So it's their choice of leaving it vacant, voting to not have a vice chair.
Okay.
So if you want one, I would do that, and then that would give me as an incentive to say that Frank can show me how to run the audio video quick machine. For 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So would the clerk do?
I don't know if years ago the clerk was a minute taker, but we've changed that model. I'm not entirely sure. It's been unclear, but for formality's sake, I'd like to make a motion for Rob to serve as vice chair and for Jim to serve as clerk for the planning board.
second,
All right, all in favor? Okay. Everyone has a part to play. Okay. Oh, thank you.
Once you adjourn, we have some cake for
Okay.
Andy and
So unless there's any other business, I make a motion to adjourn for the evening. All okay, all in favor of adjourning? Aye. Deb, we've adjourned. Thank you very much.
So I guess I'm gonna be the chair of the historic district commission, I know it's.
Okay, you can have your plate full.
Look at the expression on their face.
I think Eric signed on because your last meeting too.
Yeah.
I didn't know this whole growing stage wasn't enough to slow down.
Thanks for everything from the select board too.